Carl Jung once said something that will make your blood run cold if you've ever loved a wounded man. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. But what Jung didn't tell you is that when one of those personalities is deeply wounded, that transformation can destroy you. If you've ever found yourself walking on eggshells around someone you love, if you've ever felt like you're constantly trying to fix a man who seems hell-bent on staying broken, then what I'm about to reveal in the next 17 minutes will hit you like a freight train. I'm going to show you the 3 psychological traps that wounded men unconsciously set, the real reason why you keep falling for the same type of guy. And most importantly, the dark truth about why your love isn't healing him, it's actually making him worse. This isn't some feel-good relationship advice. This is the raw, uncomfortable truth that most people are too afraid to tell you. By the end of this video, you'll never look at your relationships the same way again. Here's what nobody talks about when they throw around that phrase. Loving a wounded man is like walking on minefields. They think it's just about being careful, about watching your step. But that's not the real danger. The real danger is that you don't even know you're in a minefield until you've already lost a limb. Let me paint you a picture that's probably going to feel uncomfortably familiar. You meet this guy, and there's something about him that's different. He's not like those other men who seem shallow or predictable. This one has depth. This one has been through things. When he looks at you, it's like he's seeing straight into your soul. And when he tells you about his past, the abandonment, the betrayal, the pain, something inside you lights up. Not because you enjoy his suffering, but because your brain recognizes an opportunity. Finally, here's someone who needs what you have to give. Here's someone whose brokenness matches the shape of your need to be needed. And that right there? That's you stepping on the first mine without even knowing it exists. See, wounded men do not just carry emotional baggage. They carry entire psychological defense systems that were built in the fires of their worst experiences. These systems are sophisticated, they're automatic, and they're designed for one purpose only: to keep them safe from ever being hurt like that again. But here's the twisted part. These same defense systems that protect them from pain also protect them from love. Because to a wounded nervous system, love and pain are stored in the same file cabinet. They can't tell the difference. So when you show up with your genuine care, your desire to help, your belief that love can heal anything, you're not just offering love, you're offering the very thing his system has been programmed to reject. You're essentially walking up to a landmine and jumping on it while believing you're planting flowers. The first sign that you missed, and I guarantee you missed it because we all do, was how quickly he made you feel special. Wounded men are masters at what psychologists call love bombing. But they don't do it consciously. They do it because their emotional system is so starved for connection that when they find someone who might accept them, they pour everything they have into that person. He told you things he'd never told anyone else. He shared his deepest fears, his childhood traumas, his dreams that nobody understood. He made you feel like you were the first person who really got him, who really saw him for who he was, beneath all the pain. And you felt chosen. You felt special. You felt like finally, here was someone who valued your capacity for understanding and compassion. But what you didn't realize is that this intensity wasn't about you being special. It was about him being desperate. Wounded men don't fall in love gradually like healthy people do. They don't build trust slowly and let intimacy develop naturally. They crash into relationships like a drowning person grabbing onto a life preserver. This creates what Jung would call a complex. A cluster of emotionally charged thoughts and images that operates almost independently from conscious control. In this case, it's the savior complex meeting the wounded child complex. And when these two collide, they create an explosive dynamic that feels like destiny, but is actually just trauma calling to trauma. The second mine you stepped on was believing that his inconsistency was about you. One day he's texting you constantly, telling you how much you mean to him, making plans for the future. The next day, he's cold, distant, almost like he's a different person entirely. You probably spent hours trying to figure out what you did wrong. You replayed conversations in your head, analyzed your text messages, wondered if you said something that triggered his withdrawal. You started modifying your behavior, walking on those eggshells, trying to be the version of yourself that wouldn't cause him to pull away. But here's what was really happening. Every time he got close to you, Every time he felt that connection deepening, his wounded system started screaming danger signals. Not because you were dangerous, but because intimacy itself had become dangerous in his internal world. So he'd pull back. Not consciously, not as a manipulation tactic, but as an automatic response to what his nervous system perceived as a threat. And you, not understanding this psychological mechanism, interpreted his withdrawal as evidence that you weren't good enough, that you needed to try harder, that you needed to prove your worth. This is where the minefield becomes truly dangerous, because now you're not just walking carefully, you're changing your entire way of being to avoid setting off explosions that are going to happen no matter what you do. The third mine is the biggest one, and it's the one that keeps you trapped long after you should have walked away. It's the belief that your love is different, that your love is powerful enough to heal decades of psychological wounds, that if you just love him consistently enough, patiently enough, unconditionally enough, you'll be the one who finally breaks through his defenses and shows him that not everyone is going to hurt him. This belief feels noble. It feels like the highest form of love. But what it actually is a form of psychological arrogance disguised as compassion. Now here's where things get really uncomfortable, because I'm about to tell you something that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about love and attraction. The reason you keep finding yourself in these minefields isn't bad luck. And it isn't because wounded men are just everywhere. It's because something inside you is actively seeking them out. Jung called this phenomenon unconscious selection, and it's one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Your unconscious mind doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about what's familiar, what feels like home, even if home was a place where love came with conditions and pain came with proximity. Think about it this way. If you grew up in a house where someone you loved was emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, or wounded, your nervous system learned to associate those qualities with love itself. Your brain literally wired itself to believe that real love requires work, that it requires fixing someone, that it requires proving your worth through your capacity to endure dysfunction. So when you meet a healthy, emotionally available man who's consistent in his affection and clear about his intentions, what happens? Your system gets bored. It feels too easy, too simple, too safe. There's no challenge, no mountain to climb, no broken person to heal. And because your unconscious mind equates ease with lack of value, you either lose interest or you sabotage it. But when you meet a wounded man, someone whose emotional availability fluctuates, someone who needs healing, someone who presents a challenge, your system lights up like a Christmas tree. This feels real. This feels like love. This feels like home. The problem is, what feels like love to your wounded system isn't actually love at all. It's trauma bonding. It's addiction. It's your childhood wounds trying to complete an unfinished story by recreating the same dynamic that hurt you in the first place. And wounded men? They're masters at triggering this response. Not because they're manipulative, but because their own wounds create the exact conditions that activate your wounds. It's like two broken keys trying to unlock each other. Neither one works, but they keep trying anyway. Here's the part that's going to mess with your head. Wounded men can sense your need to be needed from across a crowded room. Not consciously. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, here's someone I can manipulate. But their wounded system recognizes your wounded system the same way sharks can smell blood in the water. They'll unconsciously share just enough of their pain to activate your savior complex. They'll be vulnerable at exactly the right moments to make you feel special and chosen. They'll create just enough distance to keep you chasing, just enough closeness to keep you hoping. And you'll think this is love. You'll think this intensity, this constant emotional roller coaster, this feeling like you're always fighting for the relationship. You'll think this is what deep, meaningful love looks like, but it's not. It's what unhealed trauma looks like when it finds another unhealed trauma to dance with. The scariest part about loving a wounded man isn't that he might leave you. The scariest part is what happens to you while you're trying to save him. You start to lose pieces of yourself that you didn't even know you were giving away. You start making excuses for behavior that you'd never tolerate from anyone else. You start believing that love means accepting whatever someone is willing to give you, even if it's scraps. You start thinking that if you just try harder, love better, give more, he'll finally heal and become the man you know he could be. But here's what really happens. Every time you accept less than you deserve, every time you make an excuse for his emotional unavailability, Every time you convince yourself that his wounds justify his behavior, you're training your own system to accept dysfunction as normal. You're literally rewiring your brain to believe that this is what love looks like. And the longer you stay in this dynamic, the harder it becomes to recognize healthy love when it shows up. This is why women who love wounded men often find themselves in the same pattern over and over again. It's not that they have bad taste in men. It's that their internal compass for what constitutes love has been corrupted by trauma. The wounded man becomes like a drug. The highs are incredibly high. When he's present, when he's affectionate, when he lets you in, it feels like you're flying. But the lows are devastating. When he withdraws, when he shuts down, when he makes you feel like you're too much or not enough, it feels like you're dying. And just like with any addiction, you start organizing your entire life around getting your next fix. You become hypervigilant to his moods, constantly trying to predict when the next withdrawal is coming, constantly trying to figure out how to extend the good times and avoid the bad ones. You lose yourself in the process. Your friends start to worry about you. Your family starts asking questions. You start defending him to people who care about you, making excuses for why he can't commit, why he disappears for days, why he treats you like you're disposable one minute and irreplaceable the next. And the whole time, you tell yourself that this is what real love looks like, that shallow people just don't understand the depth of what you have, that love is supposed to be hard work, supposed to require sacrifice, supposed to test your limits. But what if I told you that real love, healthy love, doesn't feel like work at all? What if I told you that the right person doesn't need to be fixed, doesn't need to be saved, doesn't need you to prove your worth by enduring their dysfunction? What if I told you that the intensity you've been mistaking for love is actually just anxiety, and that real love feels like peace? This is where I'm going to tell you something that's going to hurt. But you need to hear it, because it might be the thing that finally sets you free. Your love isn't healing him. In fact, your love is probably making him worse. I know that sounds harsh. I know it goes against everything you've been told about the power of love to transform people. But here's the psychological reality that nobody wants to talk about. Wounded men do not heal through being loved by someone else. They heal by doing the hard, uncomfortable work of facing their own demons, and your presence in their life is actually giving them an excuse to avoid that work. Think about it logically. If a wounded man has someone who accepts his emotional unavailability, who makes excuses for his behavior, who's always there to soothe him when his wounds act up, why would he ever feel motivated to heal? You've essentially become his emotional painkiller. And just like with any painkiller, he's developed a tolerance. He needs more and more of your understanding, your patience, your forgiveness, to get the same relief. But the wound itself? It's not getting any better. If anything, it's getting infected because it's never being properly treated. Here's what happens in the psychology of a wounded man when he finds someone willing to love him despite his brokenness. His system learns that he can get his needs met without having to change. He can have connection, without vulnerability, intimacy, without commitment, love, without having to do the terrifying work of actually healing. You think you're showing him what healthy love looks like, but what you're actually showing him is that his wounds work. They get him attention. They get him care. They get him someone who's willing to organize their entire life around managing his emotional instability. This is why wounded men often get worse in relationships, not better. The relationship becomes a place where they can act out their wounds safely, where they can be their most broken self without consequences, where they can continue the patterns that have kept them stuck for years. And you become an enabler. Not because you're a bad person, but because your own wounds make you believe that this is what love is supposed to look like. Jung talked about something called the wounded healer. The idea that we can only heal others to the extent that we've healed ourselves. But here's the twisted version of that concept. Wounded people trying to heal other wounded people usually just create more wounding. When you try to love a wounded man back to health, you're essentially saying, I can give you what you need, so you don't have to develop the capacity to give it to yourself. But psychological healing doesn't work that way. No one can do someone else's inner work for them, no matter how much love they pour into the situation. What actually happens is that you both get trapped in what psychologists call a trauma bond, a connection that's based not on genuine compatibility or healthy love, but on mutual wounding. You stay because he needs you. And he stays because you don't require him to actually change. This creates a sick kind of codependency, where both people are getting their needs met in unhealthy ways. He gets to stay broken while still receiving love, and you get to feel needed and important while avoiding your own healing work. Because here's the thing you probably don't want to admit. Focusing on his wounds is a great way to avoid looking at your own. As long as you're busy trying to fix him, you don't have to ask yourself why you're attracted to broken people in the first place. You don't have to examine your own patterns, your own fears, your own unhealed parts. The wounded man becomes your project, your mission, your purpose. And having a purpose feels better than facing the terrifying possibility that you might need to do some healing work of your own. But what if I told you that the very thing that makes you attractive to wounded men, your need to be needed, your belief that love requires sacrifice, your willingness to accept less than you deserve? What if I told you that these aren't strengths at all, but symptoms of your own unhealed wounds? What if your attraction to wounded men isn't about having a big heart, but about having unresolved trauma that seeks familiar pain? What if your ability to tolerate dysfunction isn't about being patient and understanding, but about having a nervous system that was trained to normalize chaos? This is the dark mirror that most people refuse to look into. The reason you keep finding yourself in these minefields isn't because you're unlucky, or because wounded men are just everywhere. It's because your own internal landscape is full of mines too, and wounded recognizes wounded every single time. The scariest part about this realization is that it means the problem isn't just him, it's also you. But here's the thing. That's also the most hopeful part. Because you can't change him, but you can change you. You can't control whether he decides to do his healing work, but you can control whether you do yours. You can't make him become emotionally available, but you can become emotionally unavailable to dysfunction. You can't force him to stop walking through life like a wounded animal, but you can stop volunteering to be his emotional caretaker. The question is, are you ready to stop being attracted to people who need fixing, and start being attracted to people who've already done the work to fix themselves? Are you ready to stop mistaking intensity for intimacy, chaos for chemistry, and trauma bonding for true love? Because if you are, then what I'm going to tell you in the final part of this video is going to change everything for you. Here's the part where most people expect me to give you a list of red flags to watch out for, or techniques for spotting wounded men before you get involved with them. But that's not what you need. What you need is something much more fundamental. You need to understand how to become the kind of person who is unattracted to minefields in the first place. Because here's the truth that's going to set you free. You can't avoid wounded men by learning to spot them better. You avoid them by healing the part of you that finds them irresistible. Jung said something profound about this. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The very things that drive you crazy about wounded men, their emotional unavailability, their inconsistency, their inability to commit. These are mirrors reflecting back your own unhealed patterns. The wounded man's emotional unavailability mirrors your own unavailability to yourself. His inconsistency mirrors your inconsistent relationship with your own worth. His inability to commit mirrors your inability to commit to your own healing and growth. This is why trying to fix wounded men never works. You're essentially trying to heal your own wounds through someone else's body. And that's not how psychology works. So what does real healing look like? It starts with a brutal recognition. The person you need to save isn't him. It's you. The person you need to commit to isn't him. It's you. The person whose wounds need your attention and care isn't him. It's you. Real healing means learning to give yourself the very things you've been trying to get from wounded men. It means becoming your own source of validation instead of seeking it through being needed. It means developing a relationship with yourself that's so solid, so secure, that you don't need drama and intensity to feel alive. When you heal the parts of yourself that are attracted to dysfunction, something miraculous happens. Healthy people start showing up in your life. Not because they weren't there before, but because you couldn't see them. Your wounded system was filtering them out, dismissing them as boring or too available or not challenging enough. But when you develop a healthy nervous system, healthy people start looking attractive. Consistency starts feeling like safety instead of boredom. Emotional availability starts feeling like a gift instead of something suspicious. Someone who's already done their healing work starts looking like the prize they actually are. This is what Jung meant when he talked about individuation. The process of becoming who you really are, underneath all the wounds and conditioning and trauma responses. It's about developing a relationship with yourself that's so fulfilling that you stop looking for other people to complete you. When you reach this place, love stops being about finding someone to fix or someone to fix you. Love becomes about two whole people choosing to share their wholeness with each other. But here's what nobody tells you about this process. It's going to feel wrong at first. Your wounded system is going to fight it every step of the way. When you start setting boundaries with dysfunction, when you start walking away from situations that used to hook you, when you start being attracted to healthy people, your old patterns are going to scream that you're making a mistake. Your wounded system will tell you that healthy love is boring, that if someone loves you easily, they must not really see you, that real love is supposed to be hard work and constant drama. This is normal. This is your trauma trying to keep you safe by keeping you in familiar territory. But you have to push through this discomfort, because on the other side of it is something you've probably never experienced before. Real love. Real love doesn't feel like walking on minefields. Real love feels like coming home to yourself. Real love doesn't require you to fix anyone or be fixed by anyone. Real love is two people who've done their own work choosing to build something beautiful together. Real love doesn't make you anxious or constantly questioning your worth. Real love makes you feel more like yourself, not less. The path out of the minefield isn't about learning to navigate it better. It's about learning that you deserve to walk on solid ground. It's about healing the parts of you that believe love is supposed to hurt, that believe you have to earn affection through suffering, that believe your value comes from being useful to broken people. Here's your homework. Start paying attention to how love feels in your body. Does it feel like peace or like anxiety? Does it feel like expansion or like contraction? Does it make you feel more like yourself or like you need to be someone else? Because wounded love feels like anxiety in the body. It feels like walking on eggshells, like constant vigilance, like never quite being able to relax. Healthy love feels like peace. It feels like safety. It feels like being able to breathe fully for the first time in years. If you've never experienced that kind of love, I understand why you might think it doesn't exist, why you might believe that intensity and drama are signs of depth and meaning. But they're not. They're signs of dysfunction masquerading as connection. You deserve love that doesn't require you to lose yourself. You deserve love that doesn't ask you to tolerate what's intolerable. You deserve love that sees your worth without you having to prove it through your capacity for suffering. But before you can receive that kind of love from someone else, you have to learn to give it to yourself. The minefield you've been walking through isn't really out there in your relationships. It's inside you, in the wounded parts that keep seeking familiar pain. And the beautiful thing about internal minefields is that you have the power to clear them. Stop looking for wounded men to save. Start looking for the wounded parts of yourself that need your attention. Stop trying to prove your worth through your capacity to endure dysfunction. Start proving your worth to yourself by refusing to tolerate it. The next time you feel that familiar pull towards someone who needs fixing, pause and ask yourself, what part of me is being activated right now? What wound in me recognizes the wound in them? And then, instead of moving toward them, move toward yourself. Give yourself the care and attention you were about to pour into another broken person. This is how you stop walking on minefields. This is how you find your way to solid ground. This is how you discover what love is supposed to feel like when it's not filtered through trauma and dysfunction and the need to be needed. You are not responsible for healing anyone else's wounds, but you are responsible for healing your own. And when you do that work, when you really do it, you'll discover that love was never supposed to be a battlefield at all. Love is supposed to be a sanctuary, and you deserve nothing less.